Hello, happy Friday. Good afternoon. My name is Jen Lee. I am the Executive Director at Legal Services of North Dakota, and I've been here about 2 years now as we've updated and made some changes throughout the state. And so the purpose of today, I do have a PowerPoint we'll walk through, but I wanted to have my face up here first so everyone sees who's talking, was to clarify how we're funded, what we do. We get a lot of questions about who we can help and how we can help. And so this is me taking the opportunity to try to get information out to the public and to our resources and partners and share more of that. I will likely put this up on our YouTube channel as an educational webinar out there. If you ask questions, it will go to me in chat. It shouldn't go to everyone else. So feel free to ask questions. I will not read your name as part of the question. Um, so that it'll be completely anonymous and you can feel free to ask questions about specific things that legal services does. I will not be able to answer specific legal questions or anything related to a specific case on a live webinar like this, but I also put my contact information out there for anyone who wants to reach out to me. Anyway, let me share my PowerPoint and feel free to ask questions. Again, this is supposed to be one of those things where we get away from some of the misconceptions and figure out exactly what's going on out there. So let me see. There we go. Um, so Legal Services of North Dakota, we came up with a new mission statement a couple years ago at one of our team trainings, and we came up with our team compassionately and respectfully addresses the legal needs of vulnerable populations to provide timely access to justice, empowering our community with education and knowledge. And a lot of what we do is that education and knowledge and some direct representation. So we'll go through all of those fun things. But first of all, this is my disclaimer because I am a lawyer at heart, that this is general information. It's not legal advice specific to anyone's situation, and it's not intended to create a attorney-client relationship. So my agenda for this, and when I was putting this together, I was trying to think of all the things that I wanted to try to put out there. And I likely will do more of these and happy to have you share with anyone who would like to attend one of the upcoming ones as well. But how we're funded and what the restrictions are on that funding, the types of cases we can help with, the different ways we provide legal help, why we sometimes can't take a case that seems unfair that we can't take. And then I'm happy to do Q&A as well. So jumping into that, we are a nonprofit, a 501c3. We are not state or a federal agency. We are not any type of government related agency. Our purpose is to provide civil legal services to low income and seniors in North Dakota. And civil legal services means not criminal, mostly is one way to look at it. We do have a board of directors that's made up of 8 attorneys and 4 members of the community who are eligible to be clients of legal services. And that's one way that we try to make sure that we're talking to the right populations and we're getting good feedback from people who could be our clients. We have 4 offices in North Dakota: Minot, Grand Forks, Fargo, and Bismarck. And then reservations, we are on site at various times throughout the month in Spirit Lake, in Newtown, Fort Berthold, and at Turtle Mountain and Belcourt. So we do have 12 attorneys on staff working on cases and several law students. We have grown quite a bit over the last couple of years with new programs that I'll go through. And I always put on here that we're not indigent defense, which is a public defender's office. We often get confused for that. So if someone calls in and their issue is a criminal issue, that would be something that would get referred out because we don't do any criminal issues. How we're funded. We're not a private law firm, we're a nonprofit, but we are a law firm. And I point that out because we have a lot of legal and ethical things we have to follow as a law firm. We do not receive any funding from the state of North Dakota. We rely on federal grants, which is about 82% of our funding is federal funding, foundations, and then donations through the state Bar Association donate to us, and other law firms and other foundations contribute to our donations. Funding restrictions from many of our federal funders restrict and dictate the types of cases we can take and can't take. We go through a lot of audits. We go through an annual comprehensive audit, and then each of our funders also puts us through audits to make sure that we're using the funds for the purpose that it was intended. So that's a lot of times why our restrictions are there. We do try to serve as many people as possible within these limits, keeping in mind that the demand for legal services, not just for free legal services, but overall for legal services in North Dakota is very high, and there are few attorneys. One of the things I like to encourage is if you have anyone in your family, kids, encourage them to consider being a lawyer, because we do have a shortage of attorneys in North Dakota. And it's always good to have local kids go to law school and stay here in the state. I grew up in North Dakota and I came home, and it's good to encourage kids to go to law school. Some of our current programs, there's lots of acronyms out here. I tried to define them. A lot of people think that we have just like one big pot of money that gets assigned to us, and that you have to qualify under very specific things. We have a lot of different programs, and my advice, not legal advice, but just overall advice, is if you are in need of legal services help, at least call and do an application, because our intake staff is really good at trying to find a grant to fit a particular situation under. So as we go through things, Legal Services Corporation, you'll hear it called LSD, is our federal funder. It comes from congressional appropriations, and it is the primary restriction on many of our cases is because we are a Legal Services Corporation legal aid. And those have income requirements. Anything under those grants will have an income requirement. I'll go through on the next screen of what the income limit is and the asset limits are. I'm not going to go too much into the weeds. I won't make this a full intake training, but just so you know who's eligible. The Office for Victims of Crime through OVC does our human trafficking funds, and we help with human trafficking and victims of crime through OVC. LSV is our Legal Services for Veterans, which is a VA grant that helps veterans who are in homeless situations or in danger of homelessness. And if you are a veteran, please call us if you need any civil legal needs, because there is no income limit on that grant. And we can help if there is any type of issue that could potentially lead to homelessness. And that is a fantastic program who we actually have a veteran staff attorney who helps manage that program. HUD, Housing and Urban Development. This one has come up lately, and I've seen several postings and things about how we got all of this HUD funding. So when a legal aid or any organization gets a grant, a lot of times the way it works is you get the award letter, and then there are several months of either negotiations or discussion on what your action plan looks like. There's a lot of detail that goes into setting up a program. And so for HUD, we did apply last year for a grant for eviction protection in North Dakota. There were 235 nationwide applications, and we were one of 21 that got awarded. And it is a decent amount of money. It is $1.2 million for a 2-year grant, which sounds like a lot, but when you start looking at the salaries and things that go into providing services, the problem with any grant is we have to get it set up. And so we got the award letter at the beginning of January. Then we got a shutdown order at the end of January saying that everything's frozen. And so at the moment, we still don't have final approval, but we are working on hiring staff and doing things like that. So when it says, the announcement goes out, you get $1.2 million. We don't get like a bucket of money that says that. For most of these grants, they're what are called reimbursement grants, which means we do the services, or we represent a client, or we do something that's authorized under the grant. And then we submit a bill either monthly, quarterly, semi-annually to the agency, and they reimburse us. So we have to wait till we get approval to start providing services and be able to do that. So we don't just get to run off with our money into the sunset. Disaster Legal Services, DSA, we do have current funding source to help with disaster. And disaster could be a lot of different things. We hear in the news hurricanes and fires and things like that. But in North Dakota, We have tornadoes, we have snowstorms, we have windstorms and ice storms that cause damage, and fires too. We had some fires in the western part of the state. So disaster covers a wide area of things. And so if you have any legal issues that are potentially related to something that happened with the weather or a fire, that is something that we can often help with. And then VOCA is the Victims of Crime Act. This is primarily domestic violence uh, work. And that also has some income restrictions, not as strict as the LSC restrictions. So when I say we have restrictions, they're all different. We have about 30 different programs. And that's why I want people to know when they call in that we ask so many questions because we're trying to fit people into the right programs that we can. Our intake staff, like I said, is really good at trying to get down to what we can and can't do. So let's talk about qualifying for services. There has been some information out there. Some of it's changed, and there has been some that we can't help anybody, that everyone makes too much money. This is the printout from the Legal Services Corporation Income Guidelines. So our primary federal funder says we are allowed to help people up to 125% of the federal poverty level. And this is the current chart. So if you look over here, it is not a lot of money for these household sizes. So that's the starting point, is 125% and below qualifies for legal services. Up until recently, it was gross income, household income. We did not deduct any expenses or anything from that income. So it was really hard to qualify. We recently have changed that as of last month, and this is the new update we have. Now, if you are under 200% of the federal poverty level, which is, almost doubling what we were able to do before, we can deduct expenses to get you below the 125% of poverty to qualify for all of the different grant programs we have. And qualified expenses include things like your mortgage, your rent, medical costs, medical insurance, childcare, which is a huge expense for a lot of people, transportation, like car payments and being able to get back and forth to work, child support. As long as you actually pay those amounts. So if you get housing assistance and you only pay a small amount, like $200 a month for housing, because that's the percentage that was worked out, we can only deduct the amount that you actually pay, not the market rate for those services. But that is a big change that we've recently instituted. And the reason for that is so that we can help more people and try to get more people to qualify for services as we expand and add different programs. Some of our grants, so that's the strictest. For VOCA, which is the domestic violence one, we can go up to 250% of poverty. For human trafficking, we don't have a income limit necessarily. We assess it, but 250% of poverty is a pretty good standard there. So there is some flexibility depending on the funder and who's what the issue is and the person involved too. It's pretty complicated actually. And I give a lot of props to our intake staff for trying to keep all of these things straight as we add new programs. So applying as an income, there is an asset eligibility too. You can't have like $1 million sitting in the bank. When you apply for services, we do ask a lot of questions. We go through and ask about income for all household members. We ask for your assets that you have, ask about your legal issue. So whether you apply online or over the phone, the application process is the same for everybody. It's a lot of information. And the reason for that is because we are required to keep track of every single person who calls and applies all of that information for various funders. We have seniors. We often work with seniors, especially with healthcare directives and powers of attorney. And again, there's income qualifications, but it can go up higher for seniors because we have special funding for that. Keeping track of all those things, we keep track of all of the same items, though, for every case. So when you call in and we're asking all kinds of crazy questions and you're like, well, this is a lot of information. It's because we have to track it in order to keep our funding and to keep reporting not your specific information, but just that everyone who applied was qualified for services. So we don't want to lose anything because we didn't keep track. Then we can get into what kinds of cases can we help with. we can't do, but we're going to go on the next stream. I'm going to go through what we can't do. This is a huge array of things that we help with on here. And I would say the most common ones we see are divorce and custody issues, domestic violence, um, bankruptcy and creditor like garnishments and levies of bank accounts. We see a lot of those. Public benefits, um, social security, and housing are probably our most common, like everyday consumer type things we see. We do the advanced directives for healthcare directives and powers of attorney, which everybody should have, even if you are not over 60 or even over 50. Everyone should have a healthcare directive and power of attorney. And then we get into some other interesting things that aren't as common. Um, Immigration, we are very restricted on what we can do with immigration. It mostly is under our human trafficking grant, where it's a victim of crime or trafficking. Um, and other things that we may not be able to have resources to handle is under the employment category. Discrimination and wage claims. We will help with unemployment issues, overpayments, things like that. But those aren't as common. We don't see those as often. I would guess probably 35% from the stats that I recently ran were in the family law area. Family law can be confusing, and just having someone to help walk you through that can be helpful. Domestic violence, you definitely want to make sure that you get good advice on. So we try to prioritize some of those things. But those are the types of cases, like wide range of the things we can help with. The different ways we can help, and I'm going to go through the things we can't help with because I hear those too. The different ways we can help. There is a misconception that the only types of representation that are valuable is full representation, meaning that you have an attorney-client relationship. And we actually have a bunch of different ways that we can help that gets you legal advice, gets you services without having you assigned an attorney. We do a lot of advice where we give advice on the first call. We tell you what your next steps are. We send information out to you. That is considered representation as far as most of our funders are concerned, that we're giving information out about the particular situation. So the different types of help that you'll see is full representation, which means go to court, doing negotiations, filing a divorce, filing a domestic violence protection order, maybe housing, if you have an eviction, representation there. So that's the full representation is probably the traditional way that people think of, I have a lawyer. Limited scope. We can help with document drafting. For example, I mentioned the healthcare directives and the powers of attorneys. Those are pretty limited scope. We're either sitting down with you or we're doing a virtual discussion on what you want your healthcare directive to say, what you want your power of attorney to say, and drafting those documents and sending them out. And then that's where it ends. So there could be limited scope and specific there. Legal advice and direction is our most common service. So that's when we give advice on the current situation, whether it's a legal issue or not a legal issue, give you guidance on what the next steps are, let you know if it's something that we would do full representation for or not, and then hand you off after that to your next step that you need to do. Pro bono referrals, we are tasked with connecting clients with volunteer attorneys. We are currently rebuilding some of the pro bono structure in North Dakota, and we have a lot more new things coming that I will probably do a webinar in the future to talk about all of those pro bono opportunities to connect with volunteer attorneys, because right now it's very difficult to get a pro bono attorney, just the way it's set up. And so we often hear complaints that there isn't a pro bono or volunteer attorney available. And I agree. The way it's set up, there isn't one available, and we're working on that. And then self-help and education. So there are several workshops and clinics and online resources that we're developing right now to be able to have you get advice at a clinic, at a workshop, libraries, at the courthouse itself. And so those are things that are coming, and I would welcome feedback on things that you think would be helpful if you are a service provider or if you are a potential client of LSND, what you would like to see as far as some of those things go. Because again, we're trying to help as many people as possible with limited attorneys that we have on staff for the whole state. So, okay. So here's where the drama comes in. The cases we cannot take and why we can't take them. Because I often see posted, oh, they can't help. They won't help me. Cases that we are restricted, we cannot take, otherwise we lose our federal funding. Personal injury claims. So if you are trying to get an award of some sort for a personal injury claim against anybody, like you want to file a lawsuit um, because either you were wronged somehow and it's not related to like employment discrimination or housing discrimination or something like that, we cannot take those cases. We can't do criminal defense and we don't do class actions. We also can't do litigation related to controversial things like abortion or impact litigation, meaning we're trying to make a statement. Immigration, and we cannot represent anyone who's not here legally unless they're a victim of crime. So those are cases that we cannot take. And that's why we say that in the phone call that we get. Then we get down into the disputes without a legal solution. I always, and as a private practice attorney, I often would get clients with this issue too. You can't sue somebody because you just don't like what they did or they're being a jerk. And oftentimes people don't like to hear that they may not have a legal claim. We have to be very judicious with if someone has a legal claim, great, we can help. But if there is no legal basis for either a response or a lawsuit, we have to move on to the next case because there are so many things out there. And so many people, and I see this posted in Facebook groups all the time. I'm in the Bismarck, Fargo, all the different Facebook groups, kind of reading along a lot of times. And whenever someone says call an attorney, and I'm like, they don't have a legal basis to call an attorney, those are the ones we have to say no to because there is not a legal solution to whatever problem it is. And those are hard calls to say to people and hard sometimes. Um, the next one on there is conflicts of interest. We are a law firm. We are bound by the State Bar Association and the Board of Examiners to not represent individuals who may have a conflict of interest with each other. Meaning we can't represent both sides in a divorce unless that conflict is, if it's like a mediated one, you technically can with a waiver. But what happens many times is one person will call into legal services and give their information, and we may give them advice and counsel on that first call. And then the other side will call in, and we are then conflicted from giving advice to the other side. And it often comes up too with domestic violence issues where maybe it's an older domestic violence issue that happened and someone else is calling in. We have to be very careful with conflicts of interest, and it's not our conflict. It's we can't represent clients that we have information from one that would impact another person that we represent. Conflicts are very complicated, and there are lots of different ones out there. But if it's a conflict of interest, we are prohibited from representing the second one that comes in, and possibly the first one, depending on the God. But we cannot represent incarcerated individuals. So if someone is in prison or jail, we are unable to take representation for that. And then I have two more. The first one that's on here is not enough resources available. We do have 12 attorneys now. When I started 2 years ago, we had 6 attorneys. So we have expanded quite a bit, and our numbers do show that. But our caseloads fluctuate a lot. And so sometimes when you call in, we may not have resources at that time. We may have them in the future. We're trying to get better at our letter that says we currently don't have resources, that you could reapply, and how we communicate that better. Because if one of our attorneys is getting ready to go to trial on a case, they may not have capacity to take another one. But as soon as that trial is over, we may be able to add another case. Most of our attorneys are handling between 2 and 45, or excuse me, 20 and 45 cases at any given time, which is a pretty good caseload. To keep track of 45 different cases is a lot. And then finally, one thing I didn't put on here that we don't take, it's not that we cannot take it, but if you call into our intake and you are calling people names, like our staff names, or you're calling one of our staff members yelling and screaming at them, I don't really have much patience for people who are yelling and screaming at staff. And so oftentimes we will not take cases if someone's very disagreeable or not willing to listen, because it doesn't create a great relationship for attorney-client privilege. And one of those respectful things, I don't want my staff members to be screamed at and yelled at and called names. I don't want to be screamed at and called. I'm sure no one else does either. But I would just ask that if you call in and you need services, being kind gets you a lot further. And there are times when if you're very upset and overwhelmed, I'm not talking about like crying. I was a bankruptcy attorney. I had people crying in my office all the time. That's totally fine. It's calling people like very harsh names that is really, really hard. And our intake people take a lot of people yelling at them. So it's stressful. When you're going through a legal issue, it does get stressful. So what do you do if full representation is not available when you call in? Either it's not a case that we can take, there's a conflict, it's something. There are other legal aid programs that are specific for example, immigration or things like that, that you can look at. And we try to give out those resources and keep track of all of them. We do get a lot of phone calls, interestingly enough, from people trying to call North Carolina. I don't know if there's a number out there. So we often will ask where someone's at. You have to be in North Dakota in order for us to help you, or it has to be a North Dakota legal issue at least. So if we get those North Carolina ones, we do send them back to North Carolina. And self-help resources, the state has a self-help resource center. We are working on a revamp or a add-on to make it more user-friendly for people who aren't lawyers to try to read through all those links and PDFs that are out there. They have done such a good job of getting great information out there. It's hard to navigate sometimes. And so there are guides and forms. We're always updating of what we can help people with as far as self-help goes as well. And then I would like to emphasize seeking legal help early is really important, because full representation may not be available, but you may be able to get really good advice in just that advice and counsel phone call that would help you avoid needing full representation. And what I'm primarily thinking about here is, for example, housing. If you're going to be evicted, if you call us and say our eviction hearing is tomorrow morning or in an hour, that's really difficult for us to take on full representation. We can give you some advice on what to do in court, but if you wait until the last minute, it's really hard for us to process and get something going for that. I saw this a lot with bankruptcy, where someone would wait until they got a wage garnishment or their wages were actually garnished before reaching out for help. And then it becomes a lot more urgent or intense if you wait until the last minute. So seek legal help early, keeping in mind if we don't have full representation at that moment, we may be able to help in other ways as well. So I will happy to take questions. If you have questions, I would like to wrap this up because I don't want to drone on and on forever. And feel free to send them in chat if you can. I'm hoping I have it turned on that you can send it in chat, but if I don't, I will fix that for the next one. Let me check my email real quick in case someone's emailing me. Okay. So we are here to help within our mission and funding limits. I would like to emphasize that our staff really, really enjoy what they do. They like helping people. They don't want to turn people away. They don't want to say, no, we can't do that. I tend to try to say yes to as many things as I can and try to find ways to make things work. But we have great staff and they really do want to help people. No one works at legal aid for the money, I promise you. It's people who really want to do this. So we are here to help as much as we can. If you are looking to apply, the easiest way or the best way to apply is online on our website at lsnd.org. You fill out the application online. It is being revamped a little. We're taking some of the financial requirements off of the website because we still have to talk to you, even if you submit an application online. But that gets you in our system quicker. The online application is open 24/7. You can apply. We usually get back to you within like 1 to 2 days. We have someone just processing online applications. And then they will call back and verify your information, verify your income. We are working upcoming, I will do an announcement once it's actually live, but we are working on appointment scheduling where once you get to the end of the application and submit it, it allows you to schedule your callback time because sometimes it's hard to gauge when we're going to call you. You may be at work, that kind of thing. And our phone lines are open from 9 to 3, Monday through Thursday. And you can call in and do the application over the phone. I will say when you call in, we do ask you for quite a bit of information, and we have to go through that before we can give you any legal advice because of our funding sources and what they require. So it's not because we want to know everything, get up all in your business or anything like that. We have to verify income and assets and make sure that people qualify for different programs to keep our organization going and our funding going. So if you have questions about anything you've seen, I'm happy to do these again. I will send these to partners so that people can understand what we're doing. And I'm open to feedback. I will take constructive criticism. If someone didn't have a good experience, I will take that. I try to make things better as we go, but sometimes you have to just keep moving forward and fix things as you go and grow as you go, I think is what I heard yesterday someone say on the news, where we're growing as we go. So I'm happy to take feedback on that too. If you have questions, reach out to us. Again, my name is Jen Lee. I'm the executive director, and our intake staff is mostly in Minot, but we do have offices throughout the state. So I don't see any questions in chat. Again, it may be because somehow I got disabled, but if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and I am happy to do more of these. If your organization, if you're here as a resource to an organization or another executive director, if you want staff training, staff discussion on what legal aid does or how you can get some staff training, reach out as well. We have several people on staff who can do trainings with various nonprofits, cities, police departments, whatever, so that people understand exactly what legal aid can and can't do. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I will wrap up and probably schedule another one shortly. Thank you all.